Dr. Marcus Kane never thought he would find himself floating in space aboard a medical ship called the Stellar Mercy. The human doctor was only 35 years old, but his hands had already saved hundreds of lives back on Earth. He used to work in the busy trauma centers of New Chicago, where every day brought new emergencies and challenges. Now, those same steady hands worked on alien patients whose bodies were completely different from anything he had learned about in medical school. The galaxy knew humans as Deathworlders, which meant they came from a planet so dangerous that they had become tough and violent just to survive. Most alien species stayed far away from human space because they thought Earth people were wild and unpredictable. They saw humans as warriors and fighters who were better at destroying things than healing them. The Galactic Medical Group had only agreed to let human doctors work with aliens after many years of arguing. And even then, most alien patients asked for non-human doctors when they got sick. Marcus stood in the medical bay looking at patient files on his tablet computer. The Stellar Mercy was a neutral medical ship that helped sick and injured beings from dozens of different species across the outer edge of the galaxy. His friend Dr. Lisa Harper worked at the station next to him. She had red hair that she kept tied back while she examined a patient made of crystal whose body was based on silicon instead of carbon like most living things. Lisa looked up from her medical scanner and shook her head. "Another patient wants a different doctor," she said. "The Corvin ambassador's assistant refuses to let aggressive primitives treat him." Marcus put down his tablet and sighed deeply. "Let me guess," he said. "They would rather wait 3 days for Dr. Vexai to come back from the Proxima colony than let a human look at their breathing problems." "Pretty much," Lisa replied. Her face showed the same mix of frustration and sadness that most human medical workers carried with them. "Sometimes I wonder why we even bother trying," she added quietly. The communication system suddenly came alive with an urgent message. "All medical people report to emergency stations immediately. We have incoming injured people from the mining platform disaster at Kepler 442b. They will arrive in 6 minutes." Marcus and Lisa looked at each other with understanding. Mining accidents in the Outer Rim were always terrible, and the nearest non-human medical center was 2 days away. Whatever the victims thought about human doctors would have to wait because staying alive was more important. The first group of casualties arrived on stretchers. Their blue-scaled skin and fish-like features showed they were Aquarians whose bodies had been burned and broken when the mining platform lost pressure and exploded. Marcus had studied Aquarian anatomy carefully because their dual heart system and water-based blood made them very vulnerable to sudden pressure changes. "Get me emergency fluid units," Marcus called to his medical team, "and prepare the pressure chamber for emergency surgery." One of the Aquarian victims was a female named Lyrish who had severe internal bleeding. Her regular surgeon, Dr. Kethver, had been killed in the explosion. The other Aquarian doctors on the platform were either dead or too hurt to operate. "I will not be touched by a Deathworlder," Lyrish said through her gills. Her voice was barely audible above the noise of the medical machines. "I would rather die with honor than be contaminated by primitive hands." Marcus stopped and looked down at the dying woman. Her vital signs were getting worse quickly, and without immediate surgery she had maybe 20 minutes to live. The nearest Aquarian medical facility was 47 hours away by fast ship. "Ma'am," Marcus said quietly, "I understand your concerns, but right now I am the only surgeon available who can save your life. I have performed this procedure on 17 Aquarian patients, and all of them survived." Lyrish's large dark eyes looked at him with a mixture of fear and disgust. "You are a killer wearing a healer's coat," she whispered. "Your species only knows violence and destruction." "Maybe," Marcus replied as he put on his surgical gloves. "But today this killer is going to save your life?" What happened next would become a story told throughout the galaxy for generations. Marcus performed the most difficult Aquarian heart surgery ever attempted by a human doctor. He worked for 11 straight hours to repair the damage to Lyrish's double heart system. His hands moved with steady precision through the delicate network of water-filled vessels. Even the Aquarian medical experts who watched through holographic video links were amazed by his skill, but it was not just his technical ability that People would remember. When Lyrish's condition became critical during the surgery, Marcus did something no one expected. He began to sing an old Earth lullaby that his grandmother had taught him when he was a child. The melody was hauntingly beautiful even to alien ears. The song seemed to calm not only the patient but everyone in the medical room. It created an atmosphere of peace in the middle of chaos and fear. When Lyrish finally opened her eyes in the recovery room, she found Marcus sitting beside her bed. He was monitoring her vital signs himself instead of letting the automated systems do it. "Why?" she whispered. Her voice was stronger now. "Why save someone who called you a killer?" Marcus smiled as he checked her fluid levels one more time. "Because that is what doctors do," he said. "We heal people. It does not matter what species you are or what you think of us. Pain is pain and life is life." News of the surgery spread quickly through the galactic communication networks. For the first time, aliens began to see humans not as barely civilized warriors, but as beings capable of deep compassion and incredible skill. The image of Dr. Marcus Kane, the Deathworlder, who sang while saving lives, began to challenge everything. The galaxy thought it knew about humanity. The story reached medical centers on hundreds of worlds. Alien doctors who had never met a human started asking questions about human medical techniques. Medical schools that had refused to accept human students began reconsidering their policies. News reporters from different species wanted to interview the singing human doctor who had saved an Aquarian's life. Marcus himself was confused by all the attention. He had simply done his job the same way he always did. He studied his patients. Anatomy, learned about their culture and physiology, and then used his skills to save their life. The fact that she was from a different species and had called him a killer did not change his responsibility as a doctor, but the galaxy saw something different in his actions. They saw a human who had responded to hatred with compassion. They saw a member of a warrior species who had chosen to heal instead of harm. Most importantly, they saw proof that the Deathworlders might not be the monsters they had been portrayed as. The Stellar Mercy continued its journey through space, carrying its crew of healers toward the next emergency. Behind them, the galaxy was beginning to change one saved life at a time. 3 months after the Kepler 442b incident, Marcus found himself at the center of a media storm he never wanted. The Galactic News Network had picked up the story of the singing Deathworlder doctor, and suddenly his quiet medical practice had become the subject of attention from across the galaxy. News crews from dozens of star systems wanted to interview him, and entertainment programs offered him huge amounts of money to appear on their shows. The Stellar Mercy received communication requests from hundreds of news outlets, medical journals, and even comedy shows. Dr. Amanda Ross, the ship's chief medical officer, had to deal with over 200 interview requests in just 1 week. She looked tired as she sat across from Marcus. "In the medical bay's break room, you have become something of a celebrity," she said, stirring her coffee. "The Aquarian Medical Guild wants to give you their highest honor. The Centauri Health Ministry is asking you to speak at their annual conference." Marcus watched the brown liquid swirl in his cup. "All I did was my job, Amanda," he replied. "I do not understand why everyone is making such a big deal about it." "Because you changed something important," she said. "For the first time in galactic history, a human doctor has gained real respect from the alien medical community." "Do you know what they are calling you in the medical journals?" Marcus was afraid to ask. "The gentle warrior," she continued. "The healer from the death world. Some of the more artistic species have started calling you the bridge between worlds." Marcus groaned and rubbed his temples. "I just want to practice medicine in peace," he said. Their conversation was interrupted when Dr. Lisa Harper arrived, looking worried. "We have got a problem," she announced. "The Tertian Diplomatic Corps is requesting immediate medical help. Their ambassador to the Galactic Council has had a massive heart attack, and they are specifically asking for you." Marcus looked up sharply. "Me?" he asked. "But there are dozens of qualified heart surgeons closer to the Tertian homeworld." "Apparently. Ambassador Zaylock heard about your work with Lyrish," Lisa explained. "He told his staff that if he was going to die, he wanted to die under the care of the human who sings life back into the dying." The weight of the request settled on Marcus's shoulders. like a heavy blanket. The Tertians were one of the most powerful species in the Galactic Council, and their ambassador was a key figure in keeping between different worlds. If he died while under human medical care, it could damage human-alien relations for decades. But if Marcus refused to take the case, it would be seen as proof that human medicine was not good enough for important patients. How long do we have? Marcus asked. His ship is already connecting to our docking bay, Lisa replied. He is in critical condition and maybe has only hours left to live. Marcus stood up and squared his shoulders. Then let us get to work, he said with determination. Ambassador Zaylock was a massive being even by Tertian standards. His rock-like skin was covered with gray patches that showed his heart was failing badly. His breathing was difficult despite the portable air processor that was keeping him alive. His three-chambered heart was shutting down, and the mineral deposits that acted like blood vessels in his species were turning hard and blocking blood flow. Dr. Kane Zaylock said in a voice that sounded like distant thunder. I have heard that you have the rare gift of healing with both skill and compassion. My people believe that the spirit of the healer is as important as the knowledge they carry. Marcus began his examination, carefully feeling the ambassador's chest. Tertian bodies were very difficult to work with because their silicon-based biology required completely different surgical techniques than organic species. Ambassador, I have to be honest with you, Marcus said. This surgery has never been done by a human doctor before. The risk of complications is extremely high. Zaylock's deep laugh sounded like stones grinding together. Young healer, I am dying no matter what, he replied. At least with you I die in the hands of someone who understands that healing is about more than just preventing death. The surgery took 14 hours. Marcus worked with a team of specialists who were connected by holographic links, including Dr. Vexhai, the famous Tertian surgeon who had been treating the ambassador. But it was Marcus's hands that guided the delicate instruments through the ambassador's chest, carefully removing the hardened deposits and rebuilding the damaged heart chambers. Halfway through the procedure, Zaylock's vital signs began to crash, and for several minutes it seemed certain that he would die. In that moment of crisis, Marcus did something that would become his trademark. He began to sing again, but this time it was not a human song. Instead, he sang a Tertian healing chant that he had learned from medical textbooks. The ancient melody, sung in a human voice, seemed to fill the operating room with power. Dr. Vexhai, who was watching from his remote location, later told his colleagues that he had never seen anything like it. The ambassador's vital signs became stable, and the surgery continued with an almost supernatural smoothness. When Zaylock woke up, he found Marcus once again keeping watch beside his bed. The ambassador's recovery was remarkable, and he healed faster than any Tertian had ever recovered from such extensive heart surgery. You sang our ancient songs, Zaylock said with wonder in his voice. How did you know them? I studied your medical traditions, Marcus replied. I learned that for your people healing is as much about the spirit as the body. The songs are part of the medicine. The ambassador's eyes, which looked like deep pools of liquid crystal, fixed on Marcus with something close to reverence. You have given me more than life, Dr. Kane, he said. You have given me hope for what our species might become together. News of the successful surgery spread even faster than the Aquarian story. Within days, Marcus found himself on the cover of Galactic Medicine Today and invited to speak at the Tertian Medical Council. More importantly, he began receiving requests for treatment from species that had never allowed human doctors to treat them before. The Ethereal Collective sent a formal inquiry. The Vegan Confederacy quietly asked for consultation on a difficult case. Even the proud Andromedans, who considered themselves superior to all other life forms, requested information about human medical techniques, but with fame came pressure that Marcus had never experienced before. The Galactic Medical Consortium, which had initially been doubtful about human doctors, now wanted to study his methods in detail. Universities across the galaxy offered him research positions with massive salaries. The human government saw an opportunity to improve relations with alien species and began pressuring him to accept a position as a medical diplomat. Marcus, however, remained focused on his patients. Each case that came to him now carried the weight of politics between entire star systems, but he approached them with the same quiet dedication he had always shown. He studied each species' medical traditions, learned their healing songs, and treated every patient regardless of how prejudiced or powerful they were with the same gentle care. The galaxy was beginning to see that. Perhaps the Deathworlders were not so different after all. In the hands of Dr. Marcus Kane, human medicine was becoming something beautiful that crossed species, barriers, and touched the very heart of what it meant to heal. 6 months after the Tertian ambassador's surgery, Marcus Kane found himself in the most unlikely place he could imagine. He stood in the sacred healing chambers of the Ethereal Collective, which was a species so advanced that they had moved beyond physical bodies thousands of years ago. The Ethereals were beings made of pure energy who rarely bothered with what they called primitive races like humanity. But their high healer, known as the Luminous One, had requested Marcus's presence for a case that no conventional medicine could handle. Dr. Kate Murphy, who was now Marcus's new assistant, checked the atmospheric readings as they appeared in the ethereal healing chamber. The transport process had been confusing because being converted to energy and back to matter was not something human bodies were designed to experience. "I still cannot believe they asked for you specifically," Kate whispered, as she adjusted her medical scanner. "The Ethereals have not requested help from a physical species in over 3,000 years. Marcus nodded while trying to stay calm despite the amazing environment around them. The healing chamber existed in a state of controlled energy that constantly shifted between solid matter and pure light. The walls seemed to breathe and change color while patterns of electricity danced across every surface. At the center of the room, a young ethereal flickered weakly between existing and not existing like a candle flame in the wind. The Luminous One appeared before them as a brilliant cascade of golden light that somehow showed deep sadness. When it spoke, its voice went directly into their minds without using sound. "Dr. Kane, I have watched your work with great interest," the voice said. "You have something we thought no longer existed in the universe. You can heal not just the body, but the spirit itself. Our young one here, who is called Spark of New Dawn, suffers from a condition we cannot treat." Marcus approached the patient carefully while his medical scanner tried to read energy patterns instead of normal vital signs. "What kind of condition?" he asked. "Despair," the Luminous One replied simply. "Spark of New Dawn has lost the will to keep his energy together. In your terms, he is dying of a broken heart." The idea was shocking. An energy being who was one of the most advanced forms of life in the galaxy was literally falling apart because of emotional pain. Marcus had never dealt with anything like this, but something in his training told him this was still, basically, a healing challenge. It was just a different kind of wound than he was used to treating. "Tell me about Spark of New Dawn," Marcus said as he pulled up a chair beside the flickering patient. "What happened to him?" "Over the next hour," the Luminous One explained the tragic story. Spark of New Dawn had been part of a research team studying a dying star system. There he had found a primitive species that was barely able to travel in space. They were facing extinction as their sun collapsed into itself. Despite the Ethereal Collective's policy of not interfering with other species, Spark of New Dawn had tried to help them. He had failed completely. The species had died when their planet was consumed by their dying star, and Spark of New Dawn had felt their final moments of terror and despair. The emotional trauma had been so severe that he had begun to lose the ability to hold his energy form together. "We have tried every healing technique known to our kind," the Luminous One continued. "But this is not a wound that can be healed with energy manipulation or time restoration. This is a wound of the spirit, and we have forgotten how to heal such things." Marcus stood quietly for a moment, thinking about what he had heard. Then, to everyone's surprise, he began to remove his medical equipment. "What are you doing?" Kate asked with concern. "The same thing I have done with every patient," Marcus replied. "I'm going to sit with him." For the next 3 days, Marcus kept watch beside Spark of New Dawn. He did not use advanced medical technology or exotic treatments. Instead, he simply talked to the dying ethereal and shared stories of his own failures and losses. He told him about patients he had not been able to save and about the guilt that kept him awake at night. He talked about the weight of trying to heal in a universe that seemed determined to break things on the second day. Something extraordinary happened. Spark of new dawn began to respond, and his energy patterns flickered with what might have been curiosity. Marcus realized that the young ethereal had never met anyone who understood the burden of caring too much or taking responsibility. For suffering that could not be prevented, you carry the pain of others. Spark of New Dawn's voice whispered in Marcus's mind so quietly it was barely audible even telepathically. How do you bear it? Marcus smiled as he reached out to touch the edge of the ethereal's energy field. By remembering that the pain means, we are still alive and still capable of caring, he replied. The alternative is to stop feeling altogether, and that is not healing. That is just another kind of death. On the third day, Marcus began to sing. It was not one of the healing songs he had learned from other species, but something entirely new. The melody seemed to bridge the gap between matter and energy and between the physical and the spiritual. The song had no words, but its meaning was clear. You are not alone in your pain, and your caring is not a weakness, but a strength. Spark of new dawn single quotes. S. Energy pattern began to stabilize and his form became more solid and defined. The luminous one watched in amazement as the young ethereal slowly returned to full existence. How, the luminous one asked. How did you heal what our most advanced techniques could not touch? Marcus stood with exhaustion visible in every line of his body. Because I did not try to heal him, he said. I just showed him that his pain was shared and that caring enough to hurt is what makes us healers in the first place. The story of the human doctor who had healed an ethereal's broken spirit spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. Species that had never heard of Earth suddenly knew the name Marcus Kane. The ethereal collective, for the first time in their recorded history, publicly praised a lower life form. Medical schools across known space began adding courses on emotional healing to their programs, but more importantly, something fundamental had shifted in how the galaxy viewed humanity. The Deathworlders were not just skilled warriors or competent doctors. They were beings capable of deep empathy and of understanding suffering on a level that crossed all species barriers. The human who had once been seen as a primitive killer had become something unprecedented in galactic history. He was a healer whose reputation went beyond species politics and even the physical laws of the universe. Marcus returned to the Stellar Mercy to find hundreds of requests for medical assistance waiting for him. But now they were not just from desperate patients with nowhere else to turn. They were from the galaxy's greatest healers asking him to teach them about compassion. They were from medical schools across the galaxy begging him to share his techniques. The galaxy was finally beginning to understand that healing was about more than just fixing broken bodies. The crisis came as such things often do at the worst possible moment. Marcus was in the middle of a delicate brain surgery on a Meridian patient when the emergency alert echoed through the Stellar Mercy. The sound was loud and urgent, making everyone in the medical bay look up from their work. Priority 1 distress signal from the Corvan Imperial Fleet came the voice of Commander Jake Phillips from the bridge. Multiple ships disabled and massive casualties. They are requesting immediate medical assistance. Marcus paused his work, but his hands stayed steady despite the shocking news. The Corvans were humanity's oldest enemies, and they were a proud warrior species that had fought 3 separate wars with Earth colonies over the past century. Their most recent conflict had ended just 2 years ago with a shaky peace agreement. Dr. Kate Murphy, who was now his senior assistant, looked at him with concern. Marcus, this could be a trap, she said quietly. The Corvans have never requested human medical help before. Finish the surgery, Marcus said without looking up as he returned his attention to the patient. Whatever the Corvans want, this patient comes. First. 20 minutes later, with the Meridian stable and recovering, Marcus made his way to the bridge. Commander Phillips was a tough veteran of the Corvan conflicts, and he was studying the tactical display with obvious worry. It is not a trap, Phillips said as Marcus approached. Long-range sensors confirm it. Their entire 4th Fleet has been caught in some kind of space storm. Half their ships are dead in space and the other half are barely working, Marcus studied the display and noted the positions of the disabled ships. Casualties, he asked. Preliminary reports suggest over 10,000 wounded, Phillips replied. More expected as the storm continues to tear their ships apart. They are specifically requesting you, Dr. Kane. The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew the history between humans and Corvans. There had been vicious battles and terrible crimes committed by both sides. The deep hatred between the two species had lasted for generations and defined their relationship for decades. Set course for the Corvan fleet, Marcus said without hesitation. Philip stared at him with disbelief. Are you sure about this? He asked. These are the same people who destroyed the colony at New Hadley. The same ones who used biological weapons against our civilian transports. Marcus met his gaze steadily. And we are the same species that responded by targeting their medical facilities, he replied. War makes monsters of us all, Commander, but I am not a soldier anymore. I am a doctor. The journey to the Corvan fleet took 6 hours, during which Marcus and his team prepared for the largest medical emergency they had ever faced. The Corvans were a reptilian species with complex bodies. Their backup organ systems made them incredibly tough in battle, but also difficult to treat when seriously injured. As they approached the disaster site, the scale of the damage became clear. The Corvan Imperial fleet, which had once been the pride of their military, was scattered across space like broken toys. Several ships had been completely destroyed while others drifted helplessly with massive holes in their hulls. The flagship, called Conquest of Enemies, was barely functional. Its proud commander, Admiral Krextar, was a veteran of all three human Corvan wars and had personally led the attack on New Hadley. When Marcus's team transported aboard, they found him trapped in the wreckage of his command center with his legs crushed beneath a fallen beam. So Krextar growled with his voice thick with pain and barely controlled fury. A famous human healer comes to gloat over his enemies. Marcus knelt beside the Admiral while his medical scanner read the extent of the injuries. Both legs were severely damaged and internal bleeding was extensive. Without immediate surgery, Krextar would die within the hour. I am here to help, Marcus said simply as he gestured for his team to bring the emergency medical equipment. Krextar's yellow eyes blazed with hatred. I know what you are, human, he said. I know what your species is capable of. You are here to watch me die and to enjoy your revenge for New Hadley? Marcus began cutting away the debris and worked carefully to free the Admiral's legs. Maybe, he replied. Or maybe I'm here because when someone is dying, their past does not matter as much as their future. The surgery took place in the Conquest of Enemies damaged medical bay, with sparks falling from broken wires and the ship's gravity failing on and off. Marcus worked with the same steady concentration he had shown in the finest hospitals. His hands were sure and skilled despite the chaos around him. As he worked, other members of his team spread throughout the Corvan fleet treating casualties. With the same professionalism they showed to any patient, Dr. Kate Murphy found herself operating on a Corvan Marine who had been responsible for massacring an entire human settlement. Dr. Amy Foster worked to save the life of a pilot who had bombed refugee camps during the Second War, but it was Marcus's treatment of Admiral Krextar that would become the defining moment of his career. As the surgery went on, the Admiral's condition became critical. His vital signs crashed, and for several minutes it seemed certain that he would die. In that moment of crisis, Marcus did something that stunned everyone in the medical bay. He began to sing, but not a human song. Instead, he sang a Corvan death chant, which was a sacred melody that their warriors sang to honor fallen comrades. The song was one of the most sacred parts of Corvan culture, and no alien had ever been allowed to learn it. The medical bay fell silent, except for Marcus's voice carrying the ancient melody with surprising accuracy and deep respect. The Corvan medical staff watched in amazement as this human, who was a member of their most hated enemy species, performed their most sacred ritual to honor their dying admiral. Krextar's eyes opened and focused on Marcus with an expression of profound confusion. How he whispered, "How do you know the Song of Honored Passing?" Marcus's hands never stopped working as he continued the surgery. "Because I study the cultures of my patients," he replied. I learn what matters to them and what gives them comfort. Death is universal, Admiral, but how we face it is what defines us. The Admiral survived the surgery, though he would never walk again without help. As he recovered, he watched Marcus and his team work tirelessly to save Corvan lives throughout the fleet. They showed no favoritism and no hesitation. There was no sign of the hatred that had defined the relationship between their species for so long. Why? Krekstar asked finally as Marcus checked on his progress. Why save the life of your enemy? Marcus considered the question carefully. Because you are not my enemy right now, he said. Right now you are my patient. And I took an oath to heal, not to judge. The rescue of the Corvan Fourth Fleet became the most documented medical emergency in galactic history. The image of Dr. Marcus Kane singing the Corvan death chant while fighting to save Admiral Krekstar became one of the most powerful symbols of changing relationships between species. The human doctor who had sung death chants for his enemies had proven that compassion could overcome even the deepest hatred. 2 years after the Corvan rescue, Marcus Kane stood before the greatest gathering of medical professionals in galactic history. The Grand Medical Assembly, held on the neutral station of Harmony Point, had drawn healers from over 300 species to witness something that had never happened before. They were about to sign the first Universal Medical Accord that would change medicine across the galaxy forever. The assembly hall was a marvel of engineering designed to accommodate the wildly different needs of various species. Aquarians floated in special water-filled chambers, while ethereals appeared as controlled energy fields. Rock-based tertians stood alongside gas giant dwellers in pressure suits. At the center of it all, the human delegation seemed almost small and unimportant. Dr. Rebecca Hall, who was now Director of Human Medical Services, stood beside Marcus as they waited for the ceremony to begin. I still cannot believe they are naming it after you, she said while adjusting her formal diplomatic uniform. The Kane Protocol has a nice ring to it, she added with a smile. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his formal clothes. The protocol was a revolutionary medical charter that would establish universal standards for medical care across all species. It would ensure that no being would be denied treatment based on their race, their politics, or their past actions. It was everything he had worked toward, but all the attention still made him uneasy. It should not be named after me, he said quietly. This is about all of us. Every doctor and every healer who has ever put their patients before their prejudices. The ceremony began with representatives from each major species, explaining how the new protocol would change medical practice in their regions. The ethereal collective, speaking through their luminous one, announced that they would begin training physical doctors in advanced energy healing techniques. The Aquarians unveiled plans for joint research stations. Even the proud Corvans, led by Admiral Krekstar, who now served as their medical minister, pledged to open their most advanced hospitals to doctors from all species. When Marcus finally took the stage, the vast hall fell silent. Beings who had never met a human before had traveled across the galaxy to hear the doctor who had become known as the bridge between worlds. His words would be transmitted to billions of worlds and translated into hundreds of languages. They would be remembered for generations to come. 5 years ago, Marcus began with his voice carrying clearly through the hall's translation systems. I was just another human doctor on a small medical ship. I had no idea that the galaxy was watching, and no intention of becoming a symbol of anything. I just wanted to heal people. He paused and looked out at the assembled crowd. Former enemies sat beside allies while predators shared space with prey. All were united by their commitment to healing. But I have learned something important in these past years, he continued. We are not as different as we thought. Pain is universal. Suffering crosses all species barriers. And the desire to heal and to make things better exists in all of us. Marcus gestured to the diverse crowd around him. The Kane Protocol is not named after me because I am special, he said. It is named after me because I am ordinary. I am just a doctor who learned to see patients instead of aliens and individuals instead of species. Any one of you could have done what I did. Any one of you could have become this symbol, The audience stirred and a murmur of agreement rippled through the hall in dozens of different languages and communication methods. But symbols are just the beginning, Marcus continued. The real work happens in the small moments. When a Corvan surgeon saves a human child, when an ethereal healer comforts a dying Aquarian, when a Tertian doctor sings lullabies to a frightened patient from a species they have never encountered before. He smiled as he remembered his own journey from an unknown human doctor to this moment. The galaxy is vast and we are all small parts of it, he said. But every time we choose compassion over prejudice and every time we see the person beyond the species, we make the universe a little bit smaller and a little bit more connected. We become not just healers of the body, but healers of the barriers that divide us. The standing ovation that followed lasted for nearly 10 minutes. Representatives from hundreds of species showed their appreciation in their own cultural ways. Aquarians created spiraling water patterns while ethereals pulsed with synchronized light. The Corvans performed their traditional salute of deepest respect, but the real measure of Marcus's impact came in the months that followed. Medical schools across the galaxy began incorporating Kane methodology into their programs. This included not just the technical skills, but the emphasis on cultural understanding and emotional healing. The singing doctor technique, where healers learned the cultural expressions of their patients, became standard practice in trauma centers throughout known space. Dr. Kate Murphy, who was now running her own medical program on the frontier worlds, reported that prejudice-based treatment refusals had dropped by over 70%. The Corvan Medical Corps had begun joint training exercises with human doctors. Even the isolationist Vegan Confederacy had quietly begun sending their doctors to study at human medical facilities, but perhaps the most significant change was the emergence of a new generation of healers who had grown up knowing that medicine crossed species boundaries. Young doctors from across the galaxy would introduce themselves as Kane Protocol practitioners. This meant they had sworn to treat all patients with equal compassion regardless of their origin. Marcus himself had returned to the Stellar Mercy, declining offers to head prestigious medical institutes or serve as a galactic health ambassador. He still preferred working directly with patients, though now his simple medical ship had been upgraded to a state-of-the-art hospital ship staffed by doctors from dozens of species. On quiet nights when the ship was traveling between emergency calls, Marcus would often stand in the observation lounge watching the stars drift past. Dr. Lisa Harper, his old colleague who had stayed with him through all the changes, would sometimes join him there. Any regrets, she asked one evening as they watched a spectacular nebula paint the void in brilliant colors. Marcus considered the question while thinking about the patient he had been with that morning. It was a young Xanthari refugee who had been injured in a mining accident. The child's parents had been terrified when they learned their son would be treated by a human doctor. But by the end of the surgery, they had been singing human lullabies to help their child sleep. No, he said finally. I became a doctor to heal people. I never expected to help heal the galaxy too, but I'm glad it worked out that way. The Stellar Mercy continued its journey through the void, carrying its crew of healers toward the next emergency and the next opportunity to prove that compassion could bridge any gap. Behind them, the galaxy continued its slow transformation, one species at a time and one patient at a time. One healed heart at a time, the universe was becoming a smaller and more connected place. Dr. Marcus Kane had become exactly what the galaxy needed him to be. Not a symbol of human superiority or alien submission, but a living reminder that the best of any species was defined not by their capacity for destruction, but by their willingness to heal.